All right. Hello, and thank you for joining me today. Today, we're going to be talking about why can't I lose weight? This is, of course, the question on people's minds when they come to see me. Now, I am an obesity medicine specialist as well as a board certified family medicine physician. So I get this question a lot. Something's wrong. I can't lose the weight. Now, most people are starting from a lot of broken misinformation that we have been fed our entire lives. Weight loss is a matter of calories in, calories out. A calorie equals a calorie. I just need to move more. I wish I just had willpower. Sometimes people are coming to see me. They feel like they've been doing everything right. They've been exercising. They have been watching their nutrition. Nothing is budging. And they're pretty sure that something in their body is broken. We have so many preconceived notions of what it takes to lose weight that we have been fed for most of our lives about the science of obesity. And to be quite honest, there is still so much that we don't know, and so much that the medical community does not know. Now, I'm board certified in obesity medicine as well as primary care family medicine. And I've been in practice now for a little over 15 years. I will tell you that everything I'm about to share with you are things I know from my own experience, certainly some from my obesity medicine training, but very little of what I learned in medical school shows up here, and even less so in terms of my family medicine education. Physicians do not receive adequate training in nutrition, the science of obesity, preventative health, even as much as we say that we do. So there are a lot of barriers if you have been struggling with losing weight, if you've been asking for help from your primary care physician or other physicians or clinicians in your life, and you have been getting nowhere. I just want to validate that, yes, your experience is true because so many of us have received so little proper information. So, tangent aside, let's talk about why you're struggling to lose weight. When I am seeing somebody for the first time, I have a series of questions that I'm going through with them. And there are three fundamental questions that we have to answer first, because usually somewhere in these questions is at least part of our answer. So, a first question: are you hungry all of the time? Now, a fair number of people answer no to this question. They feel hungry before a meal. They feel full or satisfied after they eat. It's pretty straightforward. So they don't have physical hunger most of the time. They have it at appropriate times. Now, the people who answer yes to this question, though, they have a different experience. They might feel a physical sensation of hunger all of the time. Now, we can drill in a little deeper and find out what is that sensation that you're describing. But if they perceive that they are physically hungry, that they need food all of the time, even while they are eating, even after they've eaten, even when they've eaten an hour before, our body is tuned to physical hunger. And so if we have a physical hunger sensation, we have a strong drive to eat. And so that makes it very difficult if you are trying to do the things you're supposed to do to lose weight, right? If you have excess hunger, that is a problem. Now, there might be many sources of this. We may have some dysregulated hunger signals from past yo yo dieting. We may have excess hunger from insulin resistance and blood sugar issues. We may not be able to discern where we're feeling hunger in our body. And it may be that what we are calling hunger is actually more a desire for taste and crunch and sensation in our mouth, or dealing with boredom. So it's important to dig into that a little bit deeper. But if you are struggling with excess hunger in some capacity, that is a barrier to you losing weight. What else? Food chatter. food noise, constant cravings, constantly thinking about food. This is a great, super important question. And I'll tell you, I think that this comes more from my lived experience and what we're seeing on the GLP-1 medications. My whole life, I have constantly thought about food. Food noise is constantly in the background in my brain. I can't remember a time in my life when that wasn't true. Now, the volume of that signal can go up or down, and I have learned how to navigate being a human in this body with the food noise. But everybody that I've talked to who knows what I'm talking about when I say food noise, food chatter, frequent cravings, constantly thinking about food, this is a very difficult state to live in. If you are always thinking about food, what happens when we try and restrict food? We think about it more. Again, this is wiring that is in our bodies. We don't have to do anything to get here. This is wiring in our bodies that when we are thinking about food, when we decrease food, our food noise goes up. And again, this may be even more dysregulated if you have had weight that has gone up and down over time, but you don't have to have a weight problem to have food noise, food chatter, food cravings. When it comes to some of our newer weight loss medications, our GLP-1 medications, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, semaglutide, tirzepatide for the molecule names, one of the most important ways that these medications work is they really dial down this food noise. People will tell you, I just don't think about it that much anymore. I feel satisfied after I eat a few bites. I don't feel like having anymore. I'm not constantly thinking about food. I don't constantly think about my next meal. This is something that has been significantly underappreciated in everybody who has been trying to help other people lose weight. And it's something that we often haven't talked about enough with other people to understand that we are not broken if we experience this and that other people have this too. Now, when I'm talking with my patients about this, I am quick to point out that our food industry is working against us. Our food industry, the people who make all the yummy processed snack foods, that are out there in the world, are looking to actively hook you on their foods. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there are legitimate books that are out there. There are literal books that are out there describing how they design foods for optimal crunch, taste, so that you constantly just have this hand to mouth reaction that you're sort of mindlessly eating without getting a lot of, block of your hunger signal, right? So you don't generally feel full eating those foods, but you have this craving, this desire to keep eating. That sells them more products. But what happens in real life is suddenly you've mindlessly snacked your way to the bottom of the bag, right? You intended to have just a couple chips, but you got all the way to the bottom of the bag because of that mindless connection, right? I think this is very closely tied with, food addiction, but food noise, food chatter, that is a major part of this. And it's a major, major struggle if people are having trouble with their weight or they're trying to change their nutrition in some way. They're constantly thinking about food. That chatter, that noise is loud. And if we don't do something to quiet it, medications are not the only strategy, but they are a really effective one. If we don't do something to quiet it, it's really hard to lose weight. So it's really important that we pay attention to that. Another thing is, what is your relationship with food? Most of the people that I talk about weight issues with have a difficult relationship with food. They might immediately say, oh, I love food. There's no problem with food. I love food. They might hesitate. They might cringe a little bit because they have a difficult relationship with food and possibly a difficult relationship with their bodies as well. Another question I ask is, is there any binge behavior that happens? Do you fall into binge restrict cycles? Do you sort of numb yourself with food, not on purpose, but because your brain gives you the signal, I'm not feeling well. And you know what's going to help? Food, alcohol, right? For some people, it might be drugs or, some other, let's go have a cigarette, right? We might have a lot of automatic thinking that we have had for a long time that just drives us to go and fix our emotions with food. Now, binge eating disorder is a specific disorder where this is pathologic, right? So people have these episodes where they might eat a large amount of food, often very quickly, often when they're by themselves. They may eat to physical discomfort. They might have a deep sense of shame and humiliation afterwards. And they just find it is very, very difficult to stop in the moment and to not have these episodes in the future. Binge eating disorder is underdiagnosed, under-recognized, and it's really, really important that we find it if it's there, because that is a major barrier to weight loss. If you are doing all the right things in most of your life, but you're having repeated binge eating episodes, you are going to really struggle with your weight and sort of getting control of your eating, or it's always going to feel very tight and negative when you're in, kind of the more restrict phase. And then you're going to feel out of control at other times when the binge eating is really going on. So that is kind of at one extreme of somebody's relationship with food. Other people are just people who love food. Now, most of those people will also have food noise, food chatter, sort of constant sort of thinking about food. But the person who just really, really loves food. So that person might have a perfectly fine relationship with food, but easy to overindulge and easy to have too many calories. Again, especially in today's food environment where we have so many calories that are so easy to overeat. They're so abundant. They're relatively low cost, right? It is just easy to overdo it. And if we overdo it again and again and again and again, that will usually show up as a weight problem or some other issue for your metabolic health. So when we are thinking, gosh, why am I having such a hard time losing weight? Those are some of the questions that we need to answer right up front. Are there any of these barriers right now that are in my way? After doing a lot more discussion about this, we will often, actually, I shouldn't say often, we will always do some kind of metabolic assessment. So, certainly, I'm going to be doing an exam, we're going to be getting some numbers, but we're also going to be doing some blood work and looking very specifically to see, is there a metabolic issue going on that is affecting weight? The most notorious of these will be insulin resistance, prediabetes, because when we've got blood sugar dysregulation, when we've got insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is a surprisingly complex condition with really widespread effects on our bodies, despite the very little information that we've learned about it. When that is going on, our bodies are primed to retain weight and to even be gaining weight. And I'd like to give an example of what that might look like. I will often have people come into my office and they will tell me they have a family history of diabetes. They're really worried about their blood sugars. They are gaining weight even though they haven't changed anything, except maybe they are, restricting calories. They're trying to eat less. They're trying to move more. They're trying to do all the things that they were told to do, and the weight just keeps going up. That is a person that I'm very suspicious will have at least a little bit of insulin resistance if they don't have prediabetes, because that high insulin level will really mess with the math. Again, that platitude that we have, calories in, calories out, or all calories are created equal, right? A calorie is a calorie, is just not correct. A calorie in someone who has insulin resistance is going to land differently on their body than somebody who doesn't have insulin resistance. When we've got insulin resistance in our muscles, our liver, the fat tissue in our bodies, our pancreas, all of these different places in our body, we will have difficulty with excess fat storage. Basically, the insulin resistance leads us to not be able to use the sugar calories or the carb calories in other places. The body decides, that's okay. we're just going to turn it into fat cells, and we're just going to store those fat cells because we might face famine. There might be a long winter sometime when we're not able to get food. So we're just going to keep it in storage, no problem. But my friends, that is a problem. That is a problem for our bodies. And it's a problem for our bodies today because most of us will never see anything close to a famine. Most of us are surrounded by too many calories all the time, and especially highly processed calories that will very quickly stick on our bodies more so than less processed calories that are easier for our body to flush away with the fiber in our stool. It's really important that we find this because when we know there is insulin resistance going on, of course, that person is eventually at high risk for developing diabetes over time, but the time to act is now. We want to really reverse that pattern, not only because we don't want to get diabetes, but also because that insulin resistance is associated with inflammation and damage to other organs. Fatty liver disease, to some extent, is a problem of insulin resistance. We will increase our risk for heart attack and stroke and Alzheimer's and chronic kidney disease by having untreated insulin resistance and ongoing weight gain. Weight is the sort of easiest thing that we can see and measure as a proxy for insulin resistance, but not all insulin resistance has excess weight, and not all excess weight is insulin resistance. And so that's why we need to do a little blood work to try and tease it out. Now, how do we look for this? Much of the time, my patients have had a blood sugar measurement done before. They might have had a fasting blood sugar. They might have had a test called hemoglobin A1C, which looks at your average blood sugars for the past 3 months. And they may shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know, they said my blood sugar was normal. Blood sugar by itself is not enough to be able to really assess this. So yes, those things can be helpful. And I'll tell you, before I really learned about insulin resistance and its impacts on the body, what I would often see in that person who was gaining weight, family history of diabetes, was really worried about their blood sugar, is they would have a low average blood sugar. So that hemoglobin A1C was on the low side of normal. And they would have a high fasting sugar. So their fasting glucose might be 97, 98, 99, really pushing towards that prediabetes level. And this really confused me. How can they have a low average blood sugar, which looks fine, even good, and a high fasting blood sugar? The problem is what I didn't know to look for is insulin resistance. So most likely if I had checked insulin levels in those and insulin as it relates to blood sugar, I would have seen that their body releases very high levels of insulin in order to keep their blood sugars mostly under control. And that system works until it stops, which turns into prediabetes. But as that system is working to keep the blood sugars under control, bodies are often gaining weight. And they're often depositing fat in especially the wrong places, which is around the abdomen and into the organs themselves. That is not a good place for us to store calories in terms of our health and longevity, because that is a setup for, again, diabetes, heart disease, all kinds of diseases related to chronic long-term harm. So chronic kidney disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, all of these issues. It's really important that we find insulin resistance and treat it. What are some other ways we can look for insulin resistance or blood sugar abnormalities? Oral glucose tolerance test is another way that we can look at that, and we can couple that with an insulin level. Now, there is some amazing deep dive research information and a whole bunch of experimental techniques that are used in a laboratory setting to be able to find this. But I will tell you that if we use some of these methods and we have a high degree of suspicion, we will usually find some blood sugar issues, although we might find it at a very, very early stage, which is fine because then we can do something about it. So, really, really important that when we are struggling, why can't I lose weight? We have to do a bit of a deeper dive. We have to look and see what are the factors for you. Does your brain think about food too much? Does your body always feel hungry? Do you struggle in your relationship with food? Do you have binge eating disorder or some other condition that is making it really difficult to lose weight? Are you constantly stress eating and we need to manage stress and figure out different ways to handle that? Do you have a metabolic issue? These are all things that we need to look at more carefully before we just say, well, I don't know. Uh, we can't figure it out. We can always figure it out. We can always find something that is getting in the way, and we can always find something that we can start to do differently. So none of us should be sitting here thinking, well, I'm just broken. There's nothing I can do. There are things that we can do, but we need to start asking the right questions. We need to start doing the right evaluations so that we're really being comprehensive. To be quite honest, we in medicine need to do a better job in supporting people, especially as obesity rates continue to increase and diabetes rates and heart disease and fatty liver and chronic kidney disease. Things are going in the wrong direction, and we know that people need help. So that's what I have to share with you today. If you feel like you've been struggling, if you feel like this has been so hard, it's been so hard to figure out why I can't lose weight, just want you to know you're not alone and we're here to help. Thanks for listening.